The Velothi were a peaceful species. They had lived for 10,000 years without knowing war. Their bodies were delicate and beautiful. They had hollow bones like birds, and their skin was so thin that you could see the soft glow of their blood underneath. Their feathers came in every color of the rainbow, and when they sang, the sound was like music from heaven itself. Their home planet was a paradise. The air was gentle and warm. Food grew everywhere. There were no predators, no hunters, no creatures that killed to survive. The Velothi had evolved in a garden, and they had never needed to learn violence. The very concept of fighting was strange to them. Why would any creature hurt another? It made no sense. When the Velothi discovered space travel, they spread slowly across the stars. They built colonies on worlds as gentle as their own. They met other species in the Galactic Concord, a great alliance of peaceful civilizations. Everyone was kind. Everyone was soft. Everyone was safe. Until the Krath came. High Speaker Lyrith stood on the balcony of his tower and watched his world burn. The sky above Veloth 7 was filled with dark shapes. Thousands of them. Millions. The Krath swarm had arrived 3 days ago, and in those 3 days, everything had ended. The Krath were insects, but they were not like any insects the Velothi had ever imagined. Each one was the size of a ground vehicle, with black shells harder than metal and mouths filled with rotating teeth. They did not think as individuals. They shared one mind, one hunger, one terrible purpose. They consumed. That was all the Krath did. They landed on a world, and they ate everything. Plants, animals, people, buildings. They stripped planets, down to bare rock, and then moved on to find more food. They had destroyed 17 species before the Velothi. They would destroy many more after. Lyrith watched a wave of Krath soldiers pour through the streets of the capital city below. The Velothi ran in every direction, their beautiful wings carrying them into the sky. But the Krath could fly too. They caught the fleeing Velothi and dragged them down. The screams were terrible. "High Speaker," said an aide, rushing onto the balcony. "We must leave. The tower will fall within the hour." Lyrith did not move. Where would we go? There is nowhere safe. The Krath are everywhere. The underground shelters. Some of our people have hidden there. The Krath will find them eventually. They always do. The aide trembled. All Velothi trembled now. Fear was the only emotion left on this world. Lyrith thought of his children, his mate, his friends, all dead now, or soon to be dead. 3 million Velothi had lived on this colony. By tomorrow, there would be none, unless someone helped them. Lyrith turned suddenly. The beacon, the emergency beacon in the deep vault. Is it still functional? The aide blinked. "I believe so, High Speaker. But that beacon is ancient. It was placed here by the first colonists before we even joined the Concord. It broadcasts on all frequencies, not just Concord channels." "Yes, but who else would hear it?" "The Concord is the only civilization in this region of space." Lyrith looked at the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the swarm, there were stars. Other worlds. Other species. Perhaps some of them were not in the Concord. Perhaps some of them were different. "We have sent requests to the Concord already," Lyrith said. Their response was that help would arrive in 6 standard months. "We will all be dead in 6 days. Then, what is the point of the beacon?" "The point is hope." Lyrith moved toward the door. "Perhaps no one will answer. Perhaps we will die here, forgotten. But I will not stand still and accept death without trying everything. Come, we must reach the vault." The journey through the city was a nightmare. Lyrith had never run so fast in his life. His lungs burned. His wings ached. Around him, the world was ending. Buildings collapsed. Fire spread. The sounds of the craft were everywhere. That horrible clicking and buzzing that haunted the dreams of every Velothi survivor. They reached the vault just as a craft soldier spotted them. The creature charged, its many legs moving with terrible speed. The aide screamed and fell. Lirith did not look back. He threw himself through the vault door and sealed it behind him. Inside, the air was old and dusty. The beacon sat in the center of the room, a simple machine covered in ancient symbols. Lirith had studied these symbols as a child. They were from the old language, from before the Velothi had met other species. He activated the beacon. A light turned green. The machine hummed. Somewhere, a signal was traveling into the void, faster than light, carrying a simple message in every language the machine knew. We are dying. We need help. Anyone. Please. Lyra sat down on the cold floor and waited. Outside, the craft scratched at the vault door. They would break through eventually. It might take hours or days, but they would not stop. All he could do was hope. The signal traveled through space. It passed dead worlds and empty systems. It passed the borders of Concord space and moved into regions marked as unknown on every map. 3 days later, the signal reached the ship. The heavy cruiser Baekdu was on patrol near the edge of human-controlled space. It was not a pretty ship. Its hull was scarred from battles. Its weapons were large and ugly. It had been built for one purpose: war. Fleet Admiral Park, Yuna stood on the bridge, reading reports on her datapad. She was 53 years old, with silver streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes from decades of command. She had fought in 4 wars. She had lost friends, ships, and parts of herself that would never come back. But she was still standing. That was what humans did. They stood. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Kim Do-young from the communications station. "We are receiving a strange signal. It appears to be a distress call." Yuna looked up. "From whom?" "Unknown species. The message is broadcasting in multiple languages, including some very old Concord trade dialects. It seems to be automated." "What does it say?" Do-hyun was quiet for a moment as he translated. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. "It says we are dying. We need help. Anyone. Please." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing. They had all heard distress calls before, but something about this one was different. The desperation in those words was absolute. Yuna walked to the main display. Location? A star system called Veloth, approximately 18 hours away at maximum speed. It is outside Concord space, in unclaimed territory. Any Concord response? Do-hyun checked his screens. None detected. The Concord's nearest fleet is months away. Yuna stared at the blinking light on the map. Someone was dying out there. Someone was calling for help. And no one was coming. Except, perhaps, for her. "Signal the 7th Fleet," she said. "All ships. Change course for Veloth immediately. Maximum speed." Do-hyun hesitated. "Admiral, this is not our territory. We have no treaties with whoever is calling. Command might not approve. Then I will deal with Command later." Yuna's eyes were hard as stone. "Someone is asking for help, Lieutenant. That is all I need to know." The 7th Fleet was 12 ships. Heavy cruisers, destroyers, carriers. 10,000 human soldiers, the finest in the galaxy. They had been built to fight humanity's enemies. Today, they would fight someone else's enemies instead. The ships turned as one and jumped into hyperspace. Help was coming. Ice Speaker Lirith had been hiding in the vault for 3 days. The craft had stopped scratching at the door on the 2nd day. He did not know if they had left or if they were simply waiting. He had no food, no water, and very little hope. The beacon still blinked its green light. The signal was still broadcasting, but no one had answered. Perhaps no one would. Perhaps the Velothi would simply fade from the universe, forgotten and alone. Lyrith closed his eyes and tried to remember his home. Not this colony, but his true home on the Velothi homeworld. The singing trees, the purple mountains, the warm rain that fell every evening. He would never see any of it again. A sound broke through his memories. A deep rumble, like thunder, but different, stronger. It shook the walls of the vault. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then came another rumble. And another. The sounds were getting closer. Lyrith stood up on shaking legs. What was happening? Had the Krath found some new weapon? Were they finally breaking through? The vault door exploded inward. Lyrith screamed and fell back, covering his face with his wings. He waited for the teeth, the pain, the end. But nothing happened. When he finally looked up, he saw something that made no sense. A creature stood in the doorway. It was tall, almost 2 meters in height. It stood on 2 legs like a Velothi, but that was where the similarities ended. Its body was thick and heavy, covered in some kind of armor that looked like it had been through 100 battles. Its skin, where visible, was a strange pinkish color. Its face had 2 forward-facing eyes, like a predator's eyes. More creatures appeared behind the first one. They were all similar, though some were slightly different in size and shape. They carried weapons in their hands, black metal things that looked incredibly dangerous. The first creature spoke. Its voice was rough and strange, but the words came through a translation device on its chest. Survivors. We have survivors here. Lyrith could not speak. His whole body was frozen with fear. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to run, to fly, to escape. These creatures were wrong. They moved wrong. They felt wrong. Everything about them said danger. The creature stepped forward and removed its helmet. Underneath was a face. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth. Hair pulled back tightly. It was female, Lyrith realized, though the difference was subtle to his alien eyes. My name is Li Ji Wan, the creature said. I am a sergeant in the human military. We received your distress call. We are here to help. Human. That word meant nothing to Lyrith. He had never heard of humans. They were not in the Concord. They were not on any map he knew. You came? Lyrith managed to whisper. You actually came? Of course we came. You asked for help. Jiwan looked at him with those predator eyes, but there was something soft in them. Something almost gentle. Can you walk? We need to get you out of here. This area is not secure. Lyrith tried to stand. His legs would not obey him. The fear was too strong. Jiwan made a sound with her mouth, something between a breath and a word. Then she reached down and lifted Lyrith in her arms as if he weighed nothing. His hollow bones made him light, but the casual strength of this creature was terrifying. It is okay, Jiwan said. We have you now. You are safe. Safe. Lyrith did not feel safe. He felt like he was in the arms of a monster. But this monster had come to help, and that was more than anyone else had done. Outside the vault, the world was chaos. The sky was full of ships. Not Krath bioships, but metal vessels with hard edges and bright lights. They moved through the air with shocking speed, firing weapons that made the Krath ships explode in balls of fire. On the ground, more humans were fighting. And what fighting it was! Lyrith had never seen violence like this. The humans moved like nothing he could understand. They were fast, so fast, their bodies twisting and turning as they fired their weapons. They worked together perfectly, each one knowing exactly where the others would be. And they did not stop, ever. A Krath soldier charged at a group of humans. It was huge, twice the size of any human, with claws that could cut through metal. A human turned and faced it. The human was smaller, weaker, should have been killed instantly. The human smiled. Then the human moved, and the Krath was dead. Just like that. 1 second alive, the next second in pieces on the ground. What are you? Lyrith Breath.G1 carried him toward a large transport ship. We are humans. From a planet called Earth. I have never heard of Earth. Most species have not. We are new to this part of space. The way you fight, it is like nothing I have ever seen. Ji-Wan laughed. It was a strange sound, rough and warm at the same time. Our planet is what other species call a death world. Everything there tries to kill us. The weather, the animals, even the plants sometimes. We evolved to survive that. Lyrith stared at her. A death world. He had heard stories of such places. Worlds so dangerous that intelligent life should not be able to evolve there. The Concord considered them theoretical, impossible. But here was proof that they were real. And the proof was carrying him in her arms. They reached the transport ship. Inside, there were more humans, moving with purpose and efficiency. There were also Velothi, hundreds of them, huddled together in fear. Lyrith saw children clinging to their parents. He saw elders with broken wings. He saw the survivors of his dying world. "Hi, Speaker!" A voice called out. A young Velothi pushed through the crowd and fell at Lyrith's feet. "You are alive. We thought you were dead." "I am alive," Lyrith said. "Because of them." He gestured at the humans. The young Velothi looked at Ji-Wan with obvious terror. "They are so strange. So frightening. When they first landed, we thought they were another enemy." "They are not enemies," Lyrith said. He was still afraid, deep in his bones. But he was also beginning to understand something. These creatures, these humans, were dangerous beyond measure. But they had chosen to use their danger for protection, not destruction. That choice made all the difference. The transport ship lifted off and flew toward the human flagship, a massive cruiser that hung in orbit like a steel mountain. Through the windows, Lyrith watched the battle below. The humans were pushing the Krath back, actually pushing them back. In 3 days, the Krath had destroyed everything the Velothi had built. In 3 hours, the humans had changed the course of the war. Admiral Park Yuna was waiting when they landed in the cruiser's hangar. She stood straight and tall, her uniform perfect, her face calm. But her eyes were burning with something that Lyrith could not name. "High Speaker Lyrith, I presume," she said through her translator. "I am Admiral Park Yuna of the Terran Republic. We received your distress call." "You came," Lyrith said. It was all he could think to say. "You actually came. We did. But you do not know us. We have nothing to offer you. We are not part of your government or your alliance. Why would you come?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. "Because you asked for help. That is reason enough." Lyrith felt something wet on his face. He was crying, he realized. For the first time since the attack began, he was crying. Not from fear, but from something else. Something like hope. "The Krath are still out there," he said. "There are millions of them. They will not stop." Yuna smiled. It was a terrifying expression, full of teeth, but also full of warmth. "Neither will we." She turned to address the refugees gathered in the hangar. Her voice carried across the space, strong and clear. "People of Veloth, I know you are afraid. I know you have lost much. But I promise you this, the Krath will not take anyone else. Not today. Not ever. We are here now, and we will not leave until every single one of you is safe." The Velothi stared at her. They could not fully understand what they were seeing. This creature from a death world, this predator in human shape, was promising to protect them. It should not have made sense, but somehow it did. Lirith looked at Jiwan, who was still standing beside him. "Thank you," he said, "for saving me, for saving us." Jiwan shrugged, a very human gesture. "It is what we do. Now rest, High Speaker. The battle is just beginning, and you will need your strength." She walked away to rejoin her squad, leaving Lirith alone with his thoughts. Outside the ship, the war continued. But for the first time in days, Lirith believed that his people might survive because the humans had come, and humans, he was beginning to understand, did not know how to give up. The Krath Overmind was ancient. It had existed for 10,000 years, spreading across the galaxy like a plague of hunger. It controlled billions of individual Krath through a neural network that spanned star systems. Every Krath soldier, every worker, every ship was an extension of its will. In 10,000 years, the Overmind had never known fear. It had consumed 17 species. It had stripped hundreds of worlds bare. Nothing could stop it. Nothing could even slow it down. Until now. The Overmind watched through a million eyes as the strange new ships attacked its swarm. These creatures, these humans, fought like nothing the Overmind had ever seen. They did not run. They did not hide. They charged directly into the Krath forces with weapons blazing. And they were winning. This was impossible. The Overmind processed the data again and again, looking for errors. There were none. The humans were actually pushing back the swarm. In all its existence, the Overmind had never encountered anything like this. It sent more soldiers. Thousands. Tens of thousands. The humans killed them all. It sent its elite warriors, creatures bred for nothing but combat. The humans killed those too. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Overmind felt something new in its ancient mind. Doubt. Captain Choi Minho led the ground assault through the burning streets of the capital city. His powered armor was covered in Krath blood, a thick green liquid that smelled like rotting meat. He did not care. He had smelled worse. "Push forward," he shouted into his communicator. "Second squad, take the eastern flank. Third squad, cover the civilians. Move, move, move." His soldiers obeyed instantly. They were well-trained, experienced, and utterly fearless. They had all been born on Earth, the death world, where danger was as common as breathing. They had grown up fighting gravity that crushed weaker species. They had survived weather that could kill. They had eaten food that most aliens considered toxic. The Krath were dangerous. But compared to Earth, they were almost gentle. A wave of Krath soldiers poured out of a collapsed building. There were at least 100 of them, clicking and buzzing with that horrible sound. They charged at Minho's squad with murder in their compound eyes. Minho raised his rifle and fired. The weapon was a pulse rifle, standard issue for human ground forces. It fired bolts of concentrated energy that could punch through steel. Against Krath shells, it worked perfectly. Each shot punched a hole through a soldier, dropping it to the ground. His squad joined him, creating a wall of fire that the Krath could not cross. Bodies piled up. The air filled with the smell of burning chitin. Still the Krath came, driven by the Overmind's commands. Still the humans held. "They are not stopping," shouted one of his soldiers, a young man named O Tai-Wu. "Neither are we," Minho replied. "Keep firing." The battle lasted for 2 hours. When it was over, more than 300 Krath lay dead. Minho had lost 2 soldiers. Too many, but far fewer than it could have been. He allowed himself a moment of grief. Private Kang and Private Moon. Good soldiers. Good people. They had died protecting strangers they had never met. That was the human way. Above the planet, the space battle was even more intense. Commander Han Sejin flew her fighter through. A cloud of craft bioships, her hands steady on the controls. She had been flying since she was 16, when she first joined the academy. Now she was 32, and she had more combat experience than most pilots twice her age. The craft bioships were organic, grown rather than built. They were fast and maneuverable, with weapons that fired acid strong enough to melt metal. A single hit could destroy a human fighter. Sujin had not been hit once. "Confirmed kill number 41, said her wingman, Bei Yunji, through the communicator. "Sujin, you are absolutely insane." "I am not insane," Sujin replied, spinning her fighter to avoid a stream of acid. "I am just very good at my job." She fired her missiles. 2 bioships exploded. 43. "The enemy carrier is ahead," Yunji reported. "It is launching more fighters. Hundreds of them." Sujin looked at her sensors. The carrier was huge. A living mountain of flesh and bone that produced new bioships every few minutes. As long as it survived, the Kroth would have endless reinforcements. "Then we kill the carrier," Sujin said simply. "Just the 2 of us? Against that?" "Admiral Yuna always says that humans are too stubborn to know when they are beaten. I intend to prove her right." Sujin pushed her fighter to maximum speed and headed straight for the carrier. Yunji followed because that was what wingmen did. They flew into the swarm together, 2 tiny ships against an army. The craft tried to stop them. Bioships closed in from every direction, firing weapons and ramming attacks. Sujin dodged them all, her movements so fast that they seemed impossible. She had grown up on Earth, where the gravity was twice what most species could handle. Her reflexes were beyond anything the craft could match. She reached the carrier and fired everything she had. Missiles, torpedoes, pulse cannons. Everything slammed into the carrier's weak point, the nerve cluster at its center. The creature screamed, a sound that echoed through the void itself. Then it died, splitting apart into 1,000 pieces. The bioships it had been controlling went wild, crashing into each other, losing all coordination. Without the carrier, they were just animals, dangerous but stupid. Sujin flew through the chaos, untouched. "Kill confirmed," she said calmly. "The carrier is down, beginning cleanup of remaining hostiles." On the bridge of the Baekdu, Admiral Park Yuna watched the battle with sharp eyes. The tactical displays showed human ships dominating every engagement. The Krath were retreating, actually retreating for the first time in recorded history. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Kim Do-yeon, "the Krath are pulling back to their main fleet. They appear to be regrouping." "How many ships do they have left?" "Approximately 200. We have destroyed more than 300 in the last 6 hours." Yuna nodded. The humans had 12 ships. They had destroyed 300 enemies and lost only 2 fighters. The exchange rate was almost absurd, but she knew better than to celebrate. The Krath were not beaten. They were regrouping, analyzing, adapting. The Overmind was ancient and intelligent. It would not make the same mistakes twice. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Prepare for the next wave. The Krath will attack again, and they will be smarter this time." "Understood, Admiral." Yuna looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Overmind was watching her, studying her, trying to understand what humans were. Let it try. Humans had been underestimated before. It never ended well for the ones doing the underestimating. On the ground, Captain Minho had reached the main refugee camp. Thousands of Velothi huddled together, too afraid to move. Human soldiers formed a perimeter around them, weapons ready. A young Velothi child approached Minho. The child was small, with blue feathers that were dirty with ash and blood. Her eyes were enormous, filled with fear and something else. Curiosity. "Are you a monster?" the child asked. Minho knelt down to her level. He removed his helmet so she could see his face. He knew he looked terrifying to her, a predator from a death world. But he also knew that children needed honesty. "Some people think we are," he said. "But we only hurt those who hurt others. We would never hurt you. Promise?" "I promise." The child stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were tiny and delicate, like flower petals. "Your skin is warm," she said, "and hard. That is because we come from a difficult place. Our bodies had to be strong to survive. Why did you come here?" "My mother said no one would come." Minho thought about the question. It was simple, but the answer was complicated. Why did humans fight for strangers? Why did they risk their lives for species they had never met? He thought about Earth, about the wars and the suffering, about the long, dark centuries when humans had fought each other instead of helping each other. They had learned hard lessons during those times. They had learned what happened when no one stood up for the weak. "We came," he said finally, "because someone asked for help. And we decided a long time ago that we would always answer that call." The child nodded slowly. She did not fully understand, but she accepted the answer. "Will you beat the bad bugs?" Minho stood up and looked at the sky, where human ships were hunting Krath. He thought about his fallen soldiers. He thought about the battle still to come. "Yes," he said. "We will beat them, I promise." The child smiled. It was the first smile Minho had seen on this world. It was worth fighting for. When it was over, the Krath swarm was broken. More than 500 enemy ships had been destroyed. The ground forces had been pushed back to their landing zones, then off the planet entirely. 3 million Velothi had been saved from certain death, but victory had a price. Medical Officer Shin. Hyun walked through the field hospital that had been set up in what remained of the Velothi Capitol building. Her hands were covered in blood, some red and some colors she had never seen before. She had been working for 12 hours straight, treating wounds, saving lives, doing everything she could. It was not enough. It was never enough. 17 humans had died on Veloth 7. 17 good people who would never see their families again. Hyun had known some of them. Private Kang had been in her medical training class. Private Moon had shown her pictures of his daughter just 3 days ago. Now they were gone. She stopped beside a bed where a young Velothi lay sleeping. The creature's wing was badly damaged, torn by Krath claws. Hyun had spent 2 hours repairing it, using techniques she had learned from Velothi doctors and adapting them with human medical knowledge. The wing would heal. The child would fly again. That was something. A soft voice spoke from behind her. "You saved my daughter." Hyun turned. A Velothi adult stood there, her feathers dull with exhaustion and grief. But her eyes were clear, focused on Hyun with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "I did what I could," Hyun said. "She is strong. She will recover. You worked on her for 2 hours. I watched you. You did not stop, not even to rest or eat. That is my job." The Velothi mother shook her head. "No, that is more than a job. That is something else." She moved closer, her movements slow and careful, like she was approaching a dangerous animal. "I must ask you something. Please do not be offended. I will try not to be." "Why do you care?" It was such a simple question. Such an important one. Hyun thought about it for a long moment. She could give a simple answer, something about duty or orders or professionalism. But this mother deserved more than that. She deserved the truth. "Because she's alive," Hyun said finally. "Because every life has value. Because when I look at your daughter, I do not see a stranger or an alien. I see a child who was afraid and hurt and who needed help. But we are not your species. We are not your people. No, but that does not matter. Life is life. Pain is pain. When someone is suffering, it does not matter what they look like or where they come from. What matters is that they need help, and I can give it." The mother stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took Hyun's hand, The touch was light, almost weightless. "Thank you," the mother whispered. "Thank you for seeing her as someone worth saving." Hyung felt tears in her eyes. She blinked them away. There was still work to do. High Speaker Lirith had been summoned to the Baekdu for a meeting with Admiral Yuna. He walked through the corridors of the human ship, marveling at how different everything was. The Velothi built their structures to be beautiful. Curved walls, soft colors, artistic designs everywhere. The human ship was nothing like that. Everything was hard angles and practical surfaces. No decoration, no beauty, just efficiency. And yet, there was something beautiful about it. The ship worked perfectly. Every system, every machine, every piece served a purpose. It was not art, but it was impressive in its own way. The Admiral was waiting for him in her office. She stood when he entered, a gesture of respect that Lirith had not expected. "High Speaker," she said. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Lirith sat in a chair that had been modified to fit his body shape. Someone had taken the time to make him comfortable. It was a small thing, but it meant a lot. "The Krath have retreated," Yuna began. "Our scouts report that they are regrouping approximately 2 light years from here. They will likely return, but not for several months at least." "Several months." Lirith closed his eyes. "That is more time than I dared hope for. It is time to rebuild. Time to prepare. Time to decide what comes next." Lirith opened his eyes and looked at the Admiral. She was watching him with those strange predator eyes, but there was no threat in them. Only patience. "May I ask you something, Admiral?" "Of course. Your species is terrifying. I do not say this to insult you. I say it because it is true. The way you move, the way you fight, the way you look at the world. Everything about you screams danger to my instincts. I have to force myself not to run when I am near you." Yuna nodded slowly. "I understand. We have that effect on many species. And yet you came to help us. You lost 17 of your people protecting strangers. Why? What do you gain from this?" The Admiral was quiet for a moment. She stood and walked to the window of her office, looking out at the stars. "I will tell you a story," she said. "About my species." Lirith settled back in his chair and listened. Humans evolved on a death world. You know this. What you may not know is how that shaped us. We were not the strongest creatures on Earth. We were not the fastest or the most dangerous. There were animals that could kill us easily, weather that could destroy entire communities, diseases that could wipe out populations. How did you survive? By working together, by protecting each other, by deciding that no one would be left behind. Yuna turned to face him. That is the core of we are, High Speaker. We are survivors. And survivors understand something that predators never do. What is that? That strength means nothing if you only use it for yourself. That power is worthless unless it protects the weak. That the measure of a species is not how well it can destroy, but how well it can save. Lirith felt something shift inside him. Something important. There was a time, Yuna continued, when humans forgot that lesson. We fought among ourselves. We destroyed each other. We nearly ended our own species through war and hatred. It was the darkest time in our history. What changed? We looked at what we had done, and we felt shame. We realized that we had become the monsters we feared. So we made a choice. We decided to be different. We decided to use our strength to protect, not destroy. To help, not hurt. To answer calls for help, no matter who was calling. She walked back to her desk and sat down across from Lirith. That is why we came, High Speaker. Not for resources or territory or political advantage. We came because you asked for help, and we remember what it feels like to have no one answer. Lirith was crying again. He could not help it. The tears fell from his eyes and soaked into his feathers. "I was afraid of you," he admitted. "From the moment I first saw your soldiers, I was terrified. I thought you were as dangerous as the Krath, just wearing different shapes." "We are dangerous," Yuna agreed. "Perhaps more dangerous than the Krath. But danger is not evil. A knife can kill or heal, depending on who holds it. We have chosen to be healers, High Speaker. We have chosen to be shields. I believe you." Lirith wiped his eyes with a wing. "I did not think I would, but I do. Your people have shown me the truth through their actions. Actions matter more than words." Another lesson we learned the hard way. There was a knock at the door. Lieutenant Do-Yoon entered, his face serious. "Admiral, we have received a message from the Galactic Concord. They want to speak with you immediately." Yuna raised an eyebrow. "Do they? Interesting. They could not be bothered to help the Velothi, but now they want to talk. They seem concerned about our presence in this region. I am sure they are." Yuna stood up. "High Speaker, I must deal with this. But I want you to know something before I go. Yes? We will not abandon you. No matter what the Concord says, no matter what politics demand, we will ensure your people are protected. You have my word." Lirith believed her. He did not know how or why, but he believed her absolutely. "Thank you, Admiral." For everything, Yuna smiled, a terrifying, wonderful smile. "Welcome to the family, High Speaker. You are one of ours now." A species called humans had answered a distress call from strangers. They had fought a war that was not theirs, lost soldiers they could not replace, and asked for nothing in return. They had done the impossible. They had beaten back the Krath swarm. In the great halls of the Galactic Concord, ambassadors whispered to each other in shock. The humans were a young species, barely known outside their own territory. They had been invited to join the Concord years ago, but had declined, preferring to remain independent. Many Concord members had dismissed them as primitive and aggressive. Now, those same members were terrified. Ambassador Telvac of the Velaran Collective reviewed the battle data for the 100th time. His 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of extreme stress. "This cannot be correct," he muttered. 12 ships against 500? The casualty ratios are impossible. "And yet the data is verified," said his aide. "The humans lost 2 fighters and 17 ground soldiers. The Krath lost everything. How? How is this possible?" "The humans come from a death world, Ambassador. Their physical capabilities are far beyond what we estimated. Their reaction times, their endurance, their resistance to damage. They are built for combat in ways we cannot match." Telvik felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. For centuries, the Concord had maintained peace by being too weak to threaten anyone. They were merchants, scientists, artists, not warriors. They had assumed that violent species would eventually destroy themselves. The humans had not destroyed themselves. They had survived their death world, survived their violent history, and emerged stronger than ever. And now they were out among the stars, protecting species they had never met. It was either the best thing that had ever happened to the galaxy, or worst. On Earth, the homeworld of humanity, the reaction was more muted. 17 coffins had returned home. 17 families had received the terrible news. 17 names were added to the memorial wall in Geneva, where every human soldier who died in service was remembered. Admiral Park, Yuna attended every funeral. She shook hands with parents, spouses, children. She accepted their tears and their anger and their pride. She told them what their loved ones had done, who they had saved, why their sacrifice mattered. It was the hardest part of her job. It never got easier. The funeral for Private Kang Jie was held on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Her parents stood at the grave, their faces wet with tears and rain. Una stood behind them, silent and straight. After the ceremony, Jihee's mother approached her. "Admiral," the woman said, "I have a question. Ask it. Was it worth it? My daughter's life, for strangers we will never meet?" Una thought about the question. She had been asked it many times before, in many different forms. She always answered honestly. "Your daughter saved 3 million lives," Una said. 3 million people are alive today because she was willing to fight for them. Children who will grow up and have families of their own. Artists who will create beauty. Scientists who will discover wonders. Teachers who will pass on knowledge. She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I cannot tell you if that exchange is worth it. Only you can decide that. But I can tell you that your daughter knew what she was doing. She chose to fight. She chose to protect. She died doing something that mattered, something that will ripple across the galaxy for generations." The mother was crying openly now. She was always like that. Even as a child, she would stand up for others. She could not walk past someone in trouble. That is why she was one of us. That is why we were proud to serve with her. The mother nodded slowly. She reached out and touched Una's arm. "Thank you, Admiral, for telling me, for being here. It is the least I can do." The Velothi had requested formal protection from the Terran Republic. The request was unprecedented. No species had ever asked to be protected by another power outside the Concord. It challenged every political assumption the galaxy had made. The Concord was furious. They demanded that the humans withdraw from Velothi space immediately. They threatened sanctions, trade restrictions, even military action. Admiral Una read their demands on the bridge of the Baekdu and laughed. "Military action?" She said to Lieutenant Dohyun. "The Concord has no military. They have police forces that can barely handle pirates. Are they going to threaten us with harsh language? They seem quite serious, Admiral. They are serious about protecting their pride. They are embarrassed that we did what they could not. That is all this is." She composed a formal response to the Concord's demands. It was polite, diplomatic, and absolutely firm. The humans would not abandon the Velothi. The humans would not apologize for saving lives. The Concord could accept this reality or not, but their acceptance was not required. The response caused an uproar in the Concord chambers. Several species demanded immediate action against the humans. Others, however, began to ask different questions. If the humans could protect the Velothi, could they protect others? If the humans had defeated the Krath, could they defeat other threats? If the humans were willing to fight for strangers, what would they do for allies? One by one, species began to reach out to the Terran Republic. Some wanted trade agreements. Some wanted military partnerships. Some simply wanted to meet these strange creatures from the Death World, to understand what kind of beings would risk everything for people they had never met. The galaxy was changing. The old order, based on weakness and isolation, was cracking. Something new was emerging. Something built on strength and protection. Something human. The Krath Overmind retreated to the dark spaces between stars, processing what had happened. It had lost more than ships and soldiers at Velith 7. It had lost something far more important. Its certainty. For 10,000 years, the Overmind had believed that it was inevitable, unstoppable, the ultimate predator. Every species it encountered either fled or died. There were no other options. The humans had shown it a third option. They had stood and fought. They had won. The Overmind encoded a new directive into its genetic memory, a command that would be passed to every Krath born from this moment forward. Avoid the Death World species. They do not fear. They do not break. They will destroy us if we challenge them. It was not surrender. The Overmind did not understand surrender, but it understood survival, and the humans were a threat to that survival. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Krath changed direction. They moved away from human space, searching for easier prey. The galaxy noticed and wondered. On Velith 7, reconstruction had begun. Human engineers worked alongside Velothi builders, combining their knowledge to create structures that were both beautiful and strong. Human doctors trained Velothi medical staff in techniques they had never imagined. Human soldiers patrolled the streets, keeping the peace while the colony healed. High Speaker Lyrith stood in the center of what had once been the capital square. The buildings around him were still damaged, but work crews were everywhere. The sound of construction filled the air. The sound of hope. A human soldier approached him. It was Sergeant Lee Jiwan, the woman who had carried him out of the vault 3 weeks ago. "High Speaker," she said. "The Admiral asked me to inform you that the new defense grid will be operational within a month. You will have warning systems, orbital platforms, and a permanent communication link with the 7th Fleet." "Thank you, Sergeant." "For everything?" Jiwan shrugged. "Just doing my job." "No." Lyrith turned to face her. "It is more than that. You and your people have given us something we never had before." "What is that?" "A future." Jiwan smiled. It was still a strange expression to Velothi eyes, still slightly threatening, but Lyrith had learned to see the warmth in it. "That is what we do," she said. "We give people futures. It is kind of our thing." She walked away, joining her squad as they headed to their next task. Lyrith watched them go, marveling at these creatures who had changed everything. The Velothi had spent 10,000 years believing that the universe was gentle. They had been wrong. The universe was cold and dark and full of dangers. But it also contained humans. And humans, Lyrith now understood, were the galaxy's answer to the darkness. They were shields for the weak, warriors for those who could not fight, hope for those who had none. They were terrifying. They were wonderful. They were humanity. And as long as they existed, as long as they kept answering distress calls from strangers, the galaxy would never be quite as dark as it had been before. Lyrith looked up at the sky, where human ships patrolled among the stars. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything?" Somewhere, he knew, a human was listening and smiling. That was enough. That was everything.